Hi everybody, welcome to the first part of the lesson on examining the relationship between two variables. In this set of lessons we're going to look at charts and graphs for looking at how two variables within a data set relate to each other. The methods that you choose are going to be different based on the level of measurement of your two variables. So I'm going to do one video for each one of these so that they don't end up getting too long. First of all, we could look at the relationship between two qualitative variables. That's two variables that are both categorical. That's one set of methods. It's a completely different set of methods if both of your variables are quantitative. And it's still different yet if you're looking at the relationship between one qualitative variable and one quantitative variable in your data set. Your textbook broke these sections out a little bit differently. They did one section on tables and the other one on graphs, but I think it makes more sense to tackle it by what the relationship looks like. And to me that makes more sense, especially given that you've got this project coming up, this descriptive statistics project, which we'll talk about soon. All right, so in all three of these videos, we're going to be using this house data set. So let me take just a second to introduce it. This is a data set where we're assuming we've got 28 homes that are recently sold. These are a sample of recently sold homes in some city. And in each one of those, so each row represents a house that was sold. We're not going to use all of these variables, but let me show you some of the ones we are going to use. The number of acres in the lot, the living area of the home in square feet, the type of siding it has, whether it's wood, brick, etc., the architecture style of the home, and then the sales price in thousands of dollars, and the appraised value in thousands of dollars. So, let's get started looking at the relationship between two qualitative variables. So when you're looking at the relationship between two qualitative variables, remember qualitative means categorical. So we really only have a couple of good qualitative variables in our data set. So we'll look at the relationship between those. One of them is siding, and the other one is the architecture type. So in this case, we want to know, do homes with wood siding tend to be more ranch, split level, two-story, etc. And then the same thing with some of the other types of siding. And what we do for a relationship between two qualitative variables is we do a cross tabulation, and then with that, a stacked bar chart. So, and all of these cross tabulations are coming, you can probably recognize this from pivot tables in Excel. So first of all, let's do our first pivot table here. So this is a cross tabulation, and this just tells, how many homes were ranch and brick. So this says that there were 5 homes in the data set that were brick ranches. There were 3 of them that were combination ranches, etc. So let's create our pivot table. I'm going to go ahead and highlight these 2 columns. and then go to Insert Pivot Table. And this is almost exactly the same as what we did last time. So far it is the same. So it's taken us to a new sheet, which is what we wanted, and we've got the siding and the architecture. So we're going to take one of these variables and put it under columns, and we're going to take the other one of these variables and drag it and drop it under rows. So this looks good so far. This is what we want. This is telling us, you know, brick, combo, vinyl, wood. And I've not found a way to get rid of this blank here and here. I wish I could, but I've not been able to. So now we need to, we need our frequencies within this table. To do that, we can take either one of the variables, it doesn't matter which one, and pop it under values. If what's showing down here is not count, then we want to change it to count by going under this drop down, value field settings, and then count. The only time it wouldn't show up as count is if you happen to pick a variable that was numeric, and it would default to some. All right, so that's our cross tabulation. And I'm going to, over here, list a couple of things that we could say about this. I should say, there's not a lot we can say other than just absolutely stating what these values mean. So I'm just going to pick a couple of them so that you see what these numbers mean. So this says there are 5 brick ranches in the data set. There are 3 combo ranches, and I'm just going to put etc. And then the last one is going to be there is 1 wood 2-story. Okay, so there's not a lot you can say about that. Now, once you've got these over here, once you've got this pivot table done, there are a couple of options in here that are interesting to look at. So if you right-click where the numbers are and go down to Show Values As, let's look first at percent of grand total. So again, we've right-clicked on one of the boxes where you've got the numbers. Show Values As percent of grand total. It's very informative here to look at where you see 100%. 100% here is only on the grand total, as opposed to where it's going to look when we look at the other options. This tells us that, and that's what this is right here, this second crosstab here. That's, for example, 17.86% of the homes in the data set are brick ranches. 10.71% of the homes in the data set are combo ranches. And then if we look at the last one, 3.57% are wood 2 stories. All right, this is not all that useful of an option. There might be some times when it's useful, but next let's look at the row total and the column total. So we'll look at the column totals first. So here where we've got our numbers in the middle of the pivot table, we're going to right click and go to Show Values as % of column total. And if you see where it says the 100% along the bottom, that's going to help us with the interpretation. This tells us that of all brick homes in the data set, 45.45% were ranch, 18.18% were split level, and 36.36% were 2-story. And then I'll do one other one. Of all wood homes in the data set, 66.67% were ranch, and 33.33% were 2-story. I look at this, looking at where the 100% are helps me read it, because I could easily get confused looking at this if I don't orient myself. So I say, okay, out of 100% in this column, this is the breakdown. Out of 100% in this column, this is the breakdown. 60% ranch, 40% 2-story. And then the same thing here and here. Finally, percent of row total. I'm just going to again go in here and change our show values as to the percent of row total. And if you see that, now you see that these values over here are the ones that are 100%. And that tells me that of 100% of the ranch houses, so of all of the ranch houses, 38.46% were brick, 23.08% were combo, 23.08% were vinyl, and 15.38% were wood. And I'll do one more so you can see it. Of split level homes, so of all of these 100% split level homes, 50% were brick and 50% were vinyl. Okay, and you can talk about the 2 stories as well. So if you remember back in your Math 111 class when you talked about conditional probability, I know that may have been a while for some of you. This is essentially conditional probabilities. It's just a matter of what part is the given. So on this one, it's ranch homes that were given. So given that somebody had a ranch home, what was the likelihood that it was brick versus combo versus vinyl versus wood? So the question becomes, which one of these do I pick if I'm doing an analysis? Well, this is just coming from me. I claim I don't see a lot of use for these first two. If you're just looking at the raw data, it's hard to make heads or tails of that. There's too much going on. If you look at the percent of the grand total, I guess that could be useful somewhere if you want to know what those combinations look like. But it's these two that I think are the most useful. But it's going to depend on the context. If, for example, I am a builder and I know I want my homes to be brick, I might look and see what's popular among brick homes. So I might look at this and say, okay, well, maybe about 45% of the homes I build should be ranch, and pretty close to 18 or so percent should be split level, and the rest should be two-story. So that might help me make that decision if I know I'm making brick homes. On the other hand, if I'm in the business of doing siding, and I know that in a certain area they've got ranch homes, I might need to know which ones of these am I going to target. Am I going to try to sell the brick, the combo, the vinyl, or the wood? Which one's going to be most likely to appeal to someone who owns a ranch? All right. So the plot that goes along with these is a grouped or a stacked bar chart. You can look at the stacked ones in your book. I kind of am not a big fan of those. To me, they look a little confusing. But for this first part, let's go back to no calculation under these values. So to do a plot, I'm just going to highlight the pivot table. And I've tested this. It really doesn't matter whether you do it with the totals or not for this part of it. So I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to pick this first box here for the column or bar chart. And we'll pick the clustered column. And so this right here is going to show us, this shows us our different combinations of things. All right? We probably want a title on there. I'm going to add a title for the chart. Relationship between siding type and architecture type. So what happens to that graph then if we change show values as to % of grand total? Well, it'll change that axis for us. So that's, that's useful that it automatically does that. Now, if I right-click there and change values to % of column total, that's not good. Let me do row total first. If I do row totals, to me this makes sense because this is showing me of the ranch homes, I'm going to compare these four heights. Of split levels, I'm going to compare those two heights. And then the same thing for the two-story. So if what you want is to graph the column totals, watch what happens if we change this to column total. We saw that a minute ago, but if you change this to column total, this looks terrible because it looks like you're comparing of all of the ranches, and then these add up to over 100%. And then these don't add up to 100% at all. The easiest thing to do here is just to make a new pivot table. Or maybe, you don't have to make a new pivot table, but you can delete this chart and then just switch your rows and columns here. Put your siding down here instead. Okay, and then you can do your the row totals here. So now you would see these as the row totals, because before we had them as the column totals, but our rows and columns were switched. So now we're going to do this. Okay, and now this is the plot we want. This is saying of all of the brick homes, slightly under 50% were ranch, this % were split level, this % were two-story. All right, so I think that's it for this part of it. I did not put the plots in here, but I'll go back and do that. All right, so stay tuned for the next part.